This is a demo video of matte rendering for vehicles using Photoshop, focused on the workflow of paths rather than the painterly technique that we saw in the other classes. So this is the final result that we're gonna go through, and I'm gonna start turning off my layers in order to explain it. So we're gonna start by bringing in our sketch. In this case, this is the type A that I had brought. However, it doesn't have the necessary refinement to find everything, so I actually cleaned it up a little bit to get to that level. So we're gonna use this very tight line work to get our rendering. So in Photoshop, we have the pen tool, which is right here. Shortcut is going to be P. So if you hover over this, it should tell you what the shortcuts are next to each one. So the first step is to make a selection of the exterior contour of the car. And that needs to be very precise and very tight. So what we're going to do is we're going to, very easily using our points, go around the contour. An important thing to notice is that, for example, we have this long sweep, right? So if I try to get it like this, the result is not going to be very clean or very good. So I'm going to undo. I'm going to try and make it in the least amount of points possible, right? If I want to modify this, I can command click points. I can move them around. I can move my handles. I think in Mac it's option for this. So I'm going to continue going around it so that I can have nice, clean sweeps all the way around it, as faithfully to the whole thing as possible. Right, so if I go to my paths, I have that thing. If I don't want it to go away, I'll just name it, which in this case it's contour. I already had done one in the past, and you see it there. So the first point is to make a selection using this path. So I can do two things. I can either right click, make selection, and have 0 feather radius, or I can just Control or Command Enter. That's going to give me that. And the idea is that I can use my paint bucket, which the shortcut is G, to, in a new layer, fill that space, right? So that we have that. Now, what's the difference with the feather radius that we just discussed? If I make a selection and add that, then the edges are going to be kind of blurry. They're going to kind of fade out. And we'll use that to our advantage later. But in the meantime, that's the first thing we're going to do. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to use this button up here that's called Lock Transparency. And what that does is that, let's say I'll turn it off, and I'm going to add color, right? So I'm painting on top of and outside the thing. If I click that, I only stay inside. So it doesn't matter what I do, I'm only going to paint on the active pixels of that layer. Right? So what I usually do is I duplicate that layer that I have with contour, turn the one off so I can leave this and use it as a mask or whatever I need. And I'm gonna be using big brushes with black and white over here that I can click to change, or I can press X. And I want to use very low opacity, like a 10% maybe, right? So I'm gonna turn off my sketch so that we can see what we're doing. I'm gonna start approaching the rendering to give it some kind of global feel of what's looking up and what's looking down. If I want those surfaces to see like they're rolling, maybe I add a little bit of a fade there, right? So I already kind of see a little bit. If I want to make the front side slightly darker than the back side or the other way, I can also kind of like add it to give the light some bias. So after I have this, that's going to be my kind of like global shading layer. Oops. Right? And from here on, I'm going to go to the localized surfaces. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to turn back my sketch layers. There are elements here, like the window, like these lights, like the wheels, that are actually totally different from my shading of this body. So what I'm doing here is using the same technique of very carefully selecting all this area, right? All the elements that don't belong to this one. Right now I'm being a little bit fast, but you would have to be very precise. Right, and so on until I make a selection, and I can just choose a different key of grays and fill that in a new layer. Right, and then I can go back to my original, select the exterior with the magic wand, and just delete. So I would have all my surfaces or all my objects that are going to be important in a separate layer. Right, the same thing I'm gonna do with wheel wells and with the wheels themselves. So let me see if I have that. So just to show you. Sorry?
Can you make a perfect circle like that?
Yes, I'm gonna show you how. So I'm just going to do this as I had. Right now we have that kind of like perfect area there. The way that I did those is, let me turn off my wheel wells. I have these buttons. If I press it, you may have the line or the ellipse. We want the ellipse tool. And if I click here at the center, I'm going to start doing that, right? So right now it's plastic, it just moves everywhere. If I click Shift, I can do that. If I click Shift Alt, it's going to grow from the center. And I think that I heard if I do space bar, it also moves. So let's say that I want it there.
So how do you make that a path?
Up here you can choose to be shape path of pixels. In this case I made a path, right? So here I did Control T for transform, and I put it where I want it. Then if I do Command Enter, I get that, and I can fill it with my paint bucket and so on. Right? So that's how this were done here and there. All right? So let's continue with the shading of the main body. Now that I have the big pieces, I'm going to start working on the more local surfaces. Right? So, for example, I may have command clicking these things, and then I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to select the whole thing. I go to paths, and I'm going to make a selection, right? And I do want to have feather radius right now so that I don't have like a hard cut where my surface is changing. So when I click OK, I have my selection in that layer. So I'm going to turn off my sketch to see what I'm doing better. And I actually can hide this by doing Command H, Control H. I want this low opacity. So that if I want it lighter, I could draw it lighter, but I don't. I want it darker because it's looking forward to the ground. So I can draw that in there, right?
How is it not? So how do you have it not coloring on the wheels?
The wheels are on a layer that's in front of the layer I'm working on. So if I, like right now I have all these things for the demo, but my wheels and my wheelways are above that layer. So that's why they block the space. Right? So I have that. I can probably work on, I have made another path that selects, not that. Okay, so for example, if I wanted to select this whole thing, all right, again, make selection, 6, and that's gonna be kind of lighter than the rest of the things, right? So I need just to make sure to be on the right layer. So I can add light, or I think that I realized in the other sketch, I'm gonna hide this, Command H, that actually if I make it a little bit darker, it makes a little bit more sense, right? So I start having that. Now, if I go back to Command H, I still have that selection. And if I do Shift Command I can invert it. So now I can work on that side. Right? Now, if I continue, I can turn off my sketch layer, and I can probably work on this line here. Right? So same thing. Paths, make selection. Probably I want less. Let's try 5. Hide, Command H. Turn off my sketch layer. And then I'm gonna start basically rendering what's going on here, right? So this have some pretty drastic rounds. So I could probably add those in, right? And by doing that, surface by surface, going into the specifics, I will continue working so that it right, so for example, this one has all of the other surfaces that I'm going to be working, right? So this is up to the point where I have all accounted for, right? And I can always go to image. I'm going to duplicate this one so I don't lose it. Image, adjustments, levels, and I can make the white stand out. I can just pretty much play with contrast there. Or another thing that I could do is I could use burn and dodge to probably only get a little bit of light on the brighter areas, right? And dodge, and burn to probably get a little bit more darkness in some of the other areas as well. So whatever I feel I need, right? So in the end, we're going to have a final version. Let's say that it's that. Oh no, I can actually like this one better. Okay, so now wheels, right? So if I come to my wheel, right? So they're there. To select your layers, you can use this. And I like, if I want to direct select, I do command and click there. If you don't like that, you can tell it to be somewhere. There's something that has like a tick mark that says auto select. Where? Yeah, so that's now auto select. It's now an icon. I like it if it's just command and click, so that's personal preference. But let's say that I have these wheels and I have them with lock transparency on, which means that I can add light here and darkness there, right? So I'm going to get this one, copy it, and paste it. Now you notice that it pasted not in the exact same spot, right? You can see that moving. If you wanted to paste in the same spot, it's Shift Command V, and that's going to do it. But the cool thing is, if I transform, Command T, I can make it smaller, and if I just rotate that, I get instant volume, right? So by doing that, I can start kind of like designing what's in my wheel, and that's how I produced that, well, not that, right? And then what I did for this is that I got, for example, an ellipse or whatever you want. In this case, I created something like this. Let me do a layer. So I'll place it wherever I want it. And I'm going to, same thing, copy and paste. So duplicate, Command T to transform. If I do Command or Control click here, I can bring it into the center. And then I can just rotate this. And then I repeat the process. Duplicate layer, Control, center, and rotate, right? Now, I can get those three layers that I just did and merge them, which can be right-click merge layers, or it can be just Command E. And I could go to my back layer where my wheels are, which is this, and invert, Shift Command I, and delete that. Does that make sense?
You put it behind one of those layers?
No, I used the layer behind, so if I do this transparency, if I select this one, I'm going to Command click, right? That is that layer. So I want everything that's outside to go away. So I can use my magic wand to select outside and then go back to the layer and just erase from that selection.
Erase by clicking enter?
So, delete. Right? So, let me find where that is. That's what it does. And then using the same technique as I use in the rest of the body, I added that volume. Right? So, that gives us our car with all the things. So the next step is going to be adding highlights. And we're going to use paths to do that as well. Since here we don't have a steady stroke tool or anything of the sort, I'm going to use something called stroke path. So I will go around every single one of my edges. Right? If I go to paths, I can see where that is. Now, something important is going to be that I'm going to do stroke path, right-click stroke path. And here, it's usually probably in pencil. By default, you don't want it there, you want it in brush. But that means that my brush needs to be the thickness and finish that I want that line to become. Right now I have a gigantic brush, so if I click OK, that just did a mess. So if I go back to my brush, I can say maybe that this is a 6 pixel wide, for example. Maybe I want full opacity, and I want it white, right? So if I right click that, actually let me go and create another layer. Stroke path, okay, and I get that. So I don't want it to be exactly equal everywhere. So I'm gonna get my eraser, it's gonna be a soft eraser, and I don't want full opacity. Let's say that I get like that. So what I'm going to do is to make these things kind of vanish. Not all of them are going to be equally strong all around it, right? So check out the difference between that to that, which is what we had, right? So by doing that in every single one of my edges, I should get something like that, right? Where I've enhanced every single one. If my round has a very hard fillet, then I'm going to use a smaller brush or a harder brush. If I want to use a wider fillet, then I make that wider, right? If you want to control the hardness of your brushes, you can just simply select a soft or a hard one, or you can come here and modify that. I know you can see that a lot because it's down here, but that's how you modify it. Or you can do Command Alt right click. So if you go side by side, it's size. If you go up and down, it's softness, right? So that's how you could probably use that. So after this, it's the moment of making part lines, right? So how am I going to do that? I could use, I don't know, maybe I want something like this, and I want something like that, and I want something like that, right? So I'm part lines, I do want a hard brush. It's going to be a very small brush as well. Let's say that. Probably 5 as well, right? So now, in a layer specifically for that, I can use my paths to do right-click, stroke path. But I actually need it in black, so switch that, stroke path, okay. And it's gonna make my black part lines, right? So in this case, first of all, probably should get it aligned, right? Before we do that. But I'm just going to explain what it does. Maybe I get that, Command, paste, transform, go to the center, rotate, so then I can bring them down there. Probably have to like expand that, copy, paste, transform. Duplicate. All right, hold on a second. Yeah, but I think that something went off like in the morning. Okay, so we're back. So right click, duplicate layer, okay, transform, okay, edit, transform, free transform. Okay, so apparently I'm selecting something, okay, so that's where it was. So, okay, that's it. Duplicate, okay, transform, bring this one to the center and make it rotate, right? And then I'm going to merge these layers and then I'm going to duplicate them again. And if I go to image, adjustments invert, those are going to be white now. So I'm going to lower the opacity a little bit. I'm going to get my lines and I'm going to move them. And now I have part lines. Probably should have been a little bit thinner though, right? But that's what I'm going to do. If I select this, I'm probably going to move them to wherever my light source is, get rid of what I don't want. Move them.
Were you clicking to go from like the selected period to just the lines?
Which one?
But like how you have the lasso, you just move it around. The way
Oh.
it's selected, but then you do something to make it just the lines of that selected.
So, for example, if I use the lasso and I do this, it's only gonna, I click the arrow and it's only gonna move this because that's the only thing that's selected, right? If I don't have anything selected, then it's gonna move all of them, right? So you have part lines like that. So if you continue doing that, it'll end up looking something like that. In this case, we could probably, if we wanted to, we can add some more part lines for like the door maybe. What does it do after this? Does it, I don't know, do something like this, which is not very pretty, but I could do the same thing. And if I go to this, and let's do smaller, stroke path, okay. And then I can do the same thing in the other layer with my white part lines. Make selection, okay. Sorry, stroke path, okay. Then I can come select that. I can also select it with my pen tool and command enter. And then I can move that thing just a little bit. And that's our part line, right? So I can do the same thing here with my lasso. And I have it there, probably when I erase. I just want from here to here. And there you go. I don't particularly like those part lines in this case, but they should kind of like follow the whole thing. So since a toy car, actually I'm going to get rid of them. So this is a fully rendered grayscale thing. Probably I still need to render the windows on these things, which I would do the same methods that I just showed you. Those are here, right? And now the rest of the things is just having fun. So let's say that I decide to give this thing a ground, right? So I'm going to probably select some gray. That's where it's going to be standing. Oops, I need a new layer actually. Down here. Right, so I'm just going to make this bigger. Maybe I want something behind it that is a darker tone or a lighter tone. I don't know. That's too dark. Probably there. That's probably too light. Probably there, right? And I can start adding some color really easily, which is something really nice. Let's say that I get, this is my kind of like layer, right? So if I use my magic wand, I click outside and then invert the selection. I can create a new layer and choose any color that I want and fill that in. And then I can use my blending modes to kind of get any color that I want. So let's say that this is red. So now my car is red. But what about if I start getting my arrow and start playing with that, right? Like I say, maybe this is inspired on some sort of like striped creature. So I can pretty much do whatever I want, right? Which is how I actually got this guy here, right? And in this case, I'm adding the same another layer with this kind of like bluish color. Cool. So now another thing that I could do is to simulate speed. So I'm going to probably color pick one of the kind of like blue tones. I'm gonna go behind everything, create a layer, create a I have a flat tone, but right now I don't have pressure sensitivity. So if I want to turn that on, I go here of transfer, and the opacity jitter should be under pen pressure. And probably I'll also want shape dynamics and pen pressure. So at this point, this is blue. Right, this is blue too. Set up. Right, but maybe that is red, so I'm going to use a different layer. Right, for example, I can play with my opacities on my blending modes. For example, maybe I go to the very top and add some.
Can I see the bird poo?
Right, sorry. Oh yeah, the bird poo. It's not a lot actually. So if you wanted to kind of like do something like that, play with how these layers blend. Right, so probably this can be in their overlay. I don't know. So you start having fun with that. And then if you want to do something even more fun, you can select all of your layers except for your background, which is going to be everything up to here. Duplicate them and merge them. So Command E. So if I come to image adjustments, edit, transform, flip vertical, I can get this. I can bring this down. I can lower the opacity. I can get a big eraser that's soft. And I could probably, by using low opacity, let it fade a little bit there. Probably something that I will do also is add a gradient back there. And there we go. We have our little car. Cool. So I'll bring this back down. There it is. So let's have some fun and render stuff. Oh.